When I was young, I lived on a farm with my family that had some pretty freaky urban legends attached to it, even to the point that a lot of my indigenous family refused to visit out of fear. The story goes that there was an evil creature that lived at the bottom of the hill and came out at night to torment and play tricks on people. I never believed in that stuff, even as a kid. But one night, I started having vivid, almost real-feeling nightmares about being chased by it around the property. It got so that it ended up putting me in therapy. After a year of being haunted by this thing, I tried to tell my family that I wanted to move because of how real these nightmares were, but they just thought I had a wild imagination. It wasn't only the nightmares that made this so horrifying, though. Some days we'd find ravaged chickens, and other days goats would go missing. I'd have friends stay over and never come back, and sometimes, late at night, we'd hear something chasing our horse in the field, and she'd go crazy and scream into the early hours of the morning. My sister and I started to believe that this thing was very real. One day, a friend of the family came to visit and stayed in the cabin down the back of the property, which was the first night I'd managed to have a proper sleep in months. That night, the friend of my parents had the nightmares he'd ever had and left early the next morning to never visit again. He said, as he was packing, something chased him in his dreams, and when he woke up, he heard muffled crying outside the cabin, and it was shaking as if something was hitting the sides of the building with full force. The look of fear on that man's face still haunts me to this day. The man was shaking and crying as he drove away, and my parents refused to discuss it with us. Later on that day, my sister and I walked down to the cabin to find it was on a lean, and the inside looked like it had been hit by an earthquake. My parents sold the farm and moved away a few months after that, and I never had those nightmares again. A few years later, my siblings and I were sent an article about the farm and a murder-suicide that happened after the husband that bought the property went insane, stabbed his wife to death, and shot himself in the head. My parents refused to talk about it, but sometimes my siblings and cousins bring it up in conversation, sharing the trauma it caused us and our friends that refused to come back after the night terrors they experienced there. Back in 2005, during a family vacation in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, we stayed in a cabin in the mountains. There were 2 bedrooms downstairs and a loft bedroom upstairs. The loft was enclosed, but it had a large bifold window that could be opened to overlook the open living room below. One night, I claimed the loft for myself and went to bed before everyone else. The bifold window was closed, but the light from the living room leaked through the cracks, dimly lighting the room. I put on my headphones, popped my Levine CD into my Discman, and laid down in bed. While on my back with my eyes closed, I fumbled around with the CD player, trying to change songs. I couldn't quite get it, so I opened my eyes to see where the button was. To my surprise, there was nothing but darkness. I was confused because the light from the window was gone, and the room was pitch black. Suddenly, I realized something was covering my eyes, and it began moving away, revealing the edges of its body in the light from the window. I stared frozen at this creature, which flew back, disappearing into the shadows in the upper corners of the bedroom. I pulled the sheets over my head, closed my eyes, and turned up the volume as loudly as it would go. I ended up passing out that night. The next morning, I told my mom what happened, and she shared a strange experience she had early that morning. While sitting on the edge of her bed putting on socks, one of the dresser drawer handles started lifting and dropping against the dresser. She watched it continue for a minute before reaching over and holding it down. Then another drawer handle started doing the same, and she held that one down as well. When a third one started moving, she bolted out of the room. Several years later, I relayed this story to a new friend, and his response to the creature's physical description was, "Sounds like a wraith." Admittedly, I didn't know what that was, so he pulled up images to show me. Tears began rolling down my face, not out of sadness, but just my body's response, which was weird to me. It was exactly what I had seen that night, and that's one of the creepiest experiences of my life. Instead of giving my boyfriend a traditional Christmas gift, I booked us a weekend at a cabin on Airbnb. We weren't super outdoorsy people, so I spent a lot of time searching for something with just the right amount of privacy. I wanted something secluded, but not desolate. Due to our lack of experience, I settled on a place on the outskirts of a 500-acre farm. It was right on the river and had a house and outdoor cooking amenities. The weekend finally came, and we were so excited to escape for a few days. It's only an hour and a half from our house, but it proved a bit tricky to find. The owner sent us the classic turn in at the sign, left at the fork, right at the tree, directions to follow. Once we made it to the proximity address he gave us, after ending up at another on the property and bumping into the housekeeper, we were finally on track to reach our cabin. We drove past pigs, cows, and the main farmhouse. It was beautiful and serene until we got to the final stretch of road. It was more of a hiking trail, barely big enough for our truck. It was bumpy, unwinding, and treacherous as hell. After hyperventilating for 10 minutes or so in the passenger seat, we finally reached the bottom of the mountain, crossed a stream, and pulled up to the cabin. The first day and night went as planned. We met one of the farmhands on our first day, and the owner of the farm on the second. Both were extremely friendly and helpful. Around 7 p.m. on the second day, a truck pulled up and parked beside ours. We figured it was one of the people we had met, or maybe someone else from the farm, stopping by to say hi. But we were wrong. 3 guys hopped out of the truck and waved at us as if they were meant to be there. We were sitting on the front porch of the cabin, and my dog, a 90 lb German Shepherd, started going nuts. Not only was it intimidating, but it was loud as hell. I took him to the other side of the cabin and sent my boyfriend to see who these people were. One of the guys asked him, "How's the fishing here?" My boyfriend replied that we haven't been here long, and he said we should ask the owner who lives on the property. The guy said something along the lines of, "Oh yeah, I know. We live around here, just looking for a fishing spot." Okay. I texted the owner to let him know what's going on, but he doesn't reply. The guys fan out and begin taking pictures of the property that I know I was in. They start making videos of the property and themselves, speaking another language. Naturally, I start freaking out and text the guy again, but he doesn't reply. They leave after a little while, and I text the owner, letting him know they're on their way back up, along with the make and model of their truck, but I still don't get a reply. We agreed that none of us would be sleeping that night, so we packed our stuff and left. It's been 2 days, and still nothing from the owner. I only interacted with him a few times, but when I did, he was so personable. It just seems out of character for him to not say anything at all. It could have been nothing, but it was obvious these guys had been there before and were not looking for a fishing spot. This was not a public place and wasn't easily accessible by many means. They knew which way to go to end up at a river and were completely comfortable driving miles through clearly marked private property, passing the main farmhouse, and driving down a mountain for what I do not know. But I'm glad I never found out. In 2017, I found myself at church reluctantly participating in the Pioneer Trail at my mom's urging. Despite my initial lack of enthusiasm, an unsettling feeling lingered, and it intensified after the first night. We had covered about 10 miles when we took a break to eat. While everyone else enjoyed their meals, I couldn't shake the sensation of being watched. Choosing not to voice my unease, I dismissed it as foolish paranoia. We resumed our normal activities, and after consuming spicy chips that night, I had to use the bathroom. Upon returning to the cabin after a long day, I was ready to sleep. However, before drifting off, the sound of branches snapping caught my attention. Initially, I dismissed it, but the repeated snaps heightened my suspicion. Peering out the window, I was horrified to witness a long, white, skinny creature with a visible ribcage and burning red eyes. It resembled a distorted human, its mainly transparent skin suggesting an otherworldly nature. The creature sniffed the air, seemingly searching for something. As it slowly turned in my direction, I hastily retreated to my bunk in fear. Was I hallucinating? The breaking of branches persisted, but I resisted the urge to look out again. I woke up a cabin mate who noticed my terrified expression. After a nervous chuckle, he suggested we look together. Despite expecting to find nothing, the creature was still there, closer than before, but not facing us. We avoided looking further, closed the blinds, and attempted to sleep. The night echoed with more branch-breaking sounds, but we refrained from investigating. Half an hour later, I cautiously reopened the blinds, finding that the creature had vanished, leaving behind numerous broken branches. Unsure of what to do, we fell back asleep. Reluctant to reveal the truth, we informed the counselors about a suspected bear, prompting them to investigate without discovering anything conclusive, except for some unusual prints. Since then, I haven't returned to the Pioneer Trail.